Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the USS Frontier, watching the stars through the main viewport as his ship moved through deep space. The year was 2387, and humanity had been exploring the galaxy for over a century now. They had found dozens of worlds suitable for human life and had built colonies on many of them. But in all those years of exploration, they had never encountered another intelligent species. That was about to change. "Captain, we're picking up something strange." "On long-range sensors," said Lieutenant Sarah Park from her position at the navigation console. Her voice carried a note of excitement mixed with concern. "It's massive, sir, much larger than anything we've ever seen." Morrison walked over to her station and looked at the readings on her screen. The numbers made no sense. Whatever was out? There was the size of a small moon, but it was moving in a controlled pattern that suggested it was artificial. "How far away?" Morrison asked. "Approximately 12 light minutes from our current position," Park replied. "Should we alter course to investigate?" Morrison considered the options. The Frontier was an exploration vessel, built for long-range missions into unexplored space. Finding alien technology was exactly what they were designed to do. But he also had a crew of 200 people to think about. "Dr. Lisa Chun to the bridge," Morrison said into his communication device within minutes. The ship's chief xenobiologist arrived on the bridge. Dr. Chun was a small woman with sharp eyes and an even sharper mind. She had spent her entire career studying the possibility of alien life, though this would be her first chance to see it in person. "What do you need, Captain?" she asked. Morrison pointed to the sensor readings. "What do you make of this?" Chun studied the data for several minutes, her expression growing more serious with each passing moment. "Captain, if these readings are accurate, we're looking at technology far beyond anything humanity has ever created. The power signatures alone suggest a civilization that has mastered energy manipulation on a scale we can barely imagine." "Dangerous?" Morrison asked. "Potentially," Chun admitted. "But also the greatest discovery in human history." Morrison nodded slowly. He had been an explorer for most of his adult life, and the chance to make first contact with an alien species was not something he could ignore. "Set course for the object. Alert condition yellow. I want all departments ready for anything." As the Frontier moved closer to the mysterious object, more details became visible on their sensors. It was not just one ship, but an entire fleet of vessels, each one larger than any human-built starship. The designs were elegant and flowing, like they had been grown rather than built. "Captain," called Commander Ben Rodriguez from his station, "we're being scanned. Multiple energy beams are sweeping over our hull." "Are they hostile scans?" Morrison asked. "Unknown, sir." "The technology is completely unfamiliar." Suddenly, the main view screen flickered and changed. Instead of showing the stars ahead, it now displayed the interior of what appeared to be an alien bridge. Standing in the center of the image was a being unlike anything any human had ever seen. She was tall and graceful, with skin that seemed to shimmer like crystal in the light. Her features were sharp and angular, beautiful in an otherworldly way. Her eyes were large and completely black, with no visible pupils. When she moved, it was with a fluid grace that suggested she was not entirely solid. "I am Zarath, commander of the Velcari fleet," she said. Her voice came through the ship's speakers clearly, though her lips did not seem to move in sync with the words. "You have entered space claimed by the Velcari Empire. State your purpose here." Morrison stepped forward, his hands clasped behind his back in a gesture of formal respect. "I am Captain Jake Morrison of the human vessel USS Frontier. We are explorers, seeking new worlds and new forms of life. We mean no harm to you or your people." Zarath's expression did not change, but something in her black eyes seemed to shift. "Humans," she said, as if testing the word, "we have not encountered your species before. You will submit to boarding and inspection. Resistance will result in the destruction of your vessel." The image cut out, leaving the bridge crew staring at empty space once again. "Well, that was friendly," Rodriguez muttered. Morrison ignored the comment and turned to his communications officer. "Open a channel." To the alien fleet. Channel open, sir. Commander Zarath, we are willing to allow a peaceful inspection of our vessel. However, we request that the process be conducted with mutual respect between our species. There was a long pause before Zarath's image appeared on the screen again. This time she looked puzzled. You request? You are in no position to make request, human. Our weapons could destroy your primitive vessel in moments. Yet you speak as if you have some choice in this matter. Morrison met her gaze steadily. Every thinking being has choices, Commander. We choose to meet you in the spirit of peaceful contact between civilizations. Something flickered across Zarath's features that might have been surprise. Peaceful contact, she repeated. Do you not understand your situation? Your ship is surrounded by vessels that could reduce it to atoms. Your people will surrender or they will die. These are your only options. With respect, Commander, those are your options, Morrison replied calmly. Our options include attempting to communicate and learn from each other, sharing knowledge and culture, and perhaps building a friendship between our peoples. The alien. Commander stared at him for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice carried a note of something that might have been confusion. You show no fear, human. Your biometric readings suggest elevated stress, yet you stand there speaking of friendship while facing annihilation. This is not normal behavior. Dr. Chun stepped up beside Morrison. Perhaps what seems normal depends on one's perspective. Commander, we humans have faced many challenges in our history. We have learned that fear, while natural, need not control our actions. Zarath's black eyes fixed on Chun, and the doctor suddenly stiffened as if something was pressing against her mind. After a moment, the alien commander stepped back, her expression troubled. Interesting, Zarath said softly. Your species has experienced much suffering, yet you do not cower. This requires further investigation. Captain Morrison, you will. Transport to my flagship. Come alone and unarmed. Morrison nodded. I accept your invitation, Commander. As the transmission ended, Rodriguez grabbed Morrison's arm. Captain, this could be a trap. We have no idea what they're capable of. Morrison looked around at his bridge crew, all of them watching him with concern and trust in equal measure. Maybe it is a trap, Ben, but it's also our first chance to make contact with another intelligent species. Sometimes the greatest discoveries require the greatest risks. 20 minutes later, Morrison stood in the transporter room, wearing his dress uniform and carrying nothing but a small recorder. As the alien transporter beam enveloped him, he wondered what he would find on the other side. He was afraid, certainly, but he had been afraid before. Fear was an old companion that had taught him to be careful without teaching him to be paralyzed. The last thing he saw before the transport completed was the determined faces of his crew, watching their captain step into the unknown. The transport beam faded, and Morrison found himself standing in a chamber unlike anything he had ever seen. The walls seemed to pulse with a soft blue light that moved in patterns like flowing water. The floor beneath his feet felt warm and slightly soft, as if it were alive. The air itself seemed to shimmer with energy that made his skin tingle. Welcome aboard the Eternal Song, Captain Morrison, came Zarath's voice from behind him. Morrison turned to see the alien commander approaching, with two other beings at her side. One was similar to Zarath, but smaller and more angular, with silver patterns running along his crystalline skin. The other was massive, nearly twice Morrison's height, with darker coloring and what appeared to be armor fused directly to his body. I am honored by your hospitality, Morrison said, inclining his head slightly. Zarath studied him with those black eyes. This is Kethvil, my tactical advisor, she said, indicating the smaller alien. And Morduan, security chief. They are here to observe your reactions. My reactions to what? Morrison asked. Instead of answering, Zarath gestured for him to follow her. They walked through corridors that seemed to shift and change as they moved, the walls flowing like liquid while maintaining their solid form. Morrison tried to memorize the path, but found it impossible as the ship itself seemed to be constantly reshaping. They entered a vast chamber with a domed ceiling that showed the stars outside. In the center of the room was a raised platform surrounded by what looked like control panels made of living crystal. Zarath stepped onto the platform and the others followed. For 10,000 years, the Velcari have ruled this galaxy, Zarath began, her voice echoing in the chamber. We have encountered over 300 intelligent species. All of them have submitted to our authority when faced with our power. How do you achieve submission? Morrison asked. Kethvil stepped forward, his silver patterns glowing brighter. Through fear, human. Fear is the most primal emotion. Show a being their own death and they will do anything to avoid it. Morrison nodded thoughtfully. Fear can certainly be motivating. But it can also be overcome, can it? Zarath asked. Let us test that theory. The chamber around them suddenly changed. Morrison found himself standing not on the alien ship but on the bridge of the USS Frontier. But something was wrong. The lights were flickering and alarms were sounding. Through the viewscreen he could see Velcari ships firing on his vessel. The hull was breaching in multiple places. Captain? Came Sarah Park's voice from behind him. Morrison turned to see her lying on the floor, blood pooling beneath her. They're destroying us. Everyone is dying. Morrison felt his heart rate spike as the vision continued. He watched his crew members fall one by one, calling out to him for help that he could not provide. The ship itself was coming apart around him, but even as fear filled his mind, another part of him remained analytical. The details were wrong. The bridge layout was not quite accurate. Park's uniform had the wrong insignia. This was an illusion created by the aliens' technology. The vision shifted again. Now he was on Earth watching cities burn. He saw people running in terror as Velcari ships rained destruction from the sky. Children screamed for parents who would never come home. The oceans boiled and the continents cracked. Your entire species will suffer this fate, Zarath's voice echoed around him. Every human will know agony before they die. Your colonies will burn, your children will weep, your legacy will be nothing but ash. Morrison watched the destruction with growing sadness, but not the paralyzing terror the aliens expected. He had seen enough human history to know that suffering was not new to his species. Wars, plagues, natural disasters, humanity had faced extinction many times before. The vision changed once more. Now he was watching his own death, seeing himself torn apart by alien weapons while Zarath stood over him laughing. The pain felt real. The fear was genuine. When the illusions finally ended, Morrison found himself back on the alien platform. All three Velcari were staring at him with expressions he could not read. Fascinating, Kethvil said softly. His fear responses activated correctly, but they did not overwhelm his reasoning centers. Zarath moved closer to Morrison, her black eyes studying his face. We felt your terror, human. Through our mental link we experienced what you experienced, yet you did not break. You did not beg for mercy or offer surrender. Why? Morrison took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves. The visions had shaken him more than he wanted to admit. Because fear is just information, he said finally. It tells me that danger exists. It does not tell me what to do about that danger. Information? Morduan rumbled, speaking for the first time. His voice was like rocks grinding together. Fear is control, fear is power. Fear can be those things, Morrison agreed, but it can also be a teacher. My species has learned much from our fears. Zarath circled around him slowly, like a predator studying prey. Your biometrics show that. You're still afraid, your heart rate remains elevated. Stress hormones flood your system. Yet you stand here discussing philosophy. This makes no sense. Morrison turned to keep her in sight as she moved. With respect, Commander, it makes perfect sense. Being afraid does not mean being helpless. We humans have a saying, courage is not the absence of fear, but action in spite of fear. Action in spite of fear, Zarath repeated, as if the concept was foreign to her. You would fight us even knowing you cannot win? I would rather find a way for us not to fight at all, Morrison replied. But if you forced the choice, yes, we would fight. We have fought before against odds that seemed impossible. Kethvil, S? Patterns flickered rapidly. He speaks truth. I can sense no deception in his thoughts. This species truly believes they could resist us. Zarath stopped her circling and faced Morrison directly. You have seen what we can do. Our technology is beyond your understanding. Our ships outnumber yours by millions. Our weapons could sterilize your worlds in days. Knowing this, knowing that resistance means certain death, you would still oppose us? Morrison met her gaze steadily. We would prefer to be your friends, Commander. But we will not be your slaves. That choice has already been made by better people than me long before I was born. For a long moment, silence filled the chamber. Then Zarath asked the question that would change everything. Why aren't you afraid, human? Morrison thought carefully before answering. I am afraid, Commander. But we humans learned long ago that there are things worse than being afraid. There are things worse than dying. Living without hope, without dignity, without the freedom to choose our own path. These are the things that truly terrify us. Her. Blood ran cold when she heard his reply, though she did not yet understand why. We have been afraid before, Morrison continued quietly. And we are still here. Zarath stared at Morrison for what felt like an eternity after his words. The chamber remained silent except for the soft humming of the ship's systems. Finally, she stepped back and spoke to her companions in a language that sounded like wind. Chimes mixed with whispers. Your captain has given us much to consider, she said, switching back to English. We will continue this discussion later. For now, you will be returned to your ship, Morrison nodded. I would like to propose something, Commander. If you truly wish to understand humanity, perhaps we could arrange a more formal exchange of information. My ship carries experts in human culture and history. They could help explain why we react as we do. Kethvel's silver patterns flickered rapidly. You would willingly share your weaknesses with us? Knowledge is not weakness, Morrison replied. Understanding between species can only benefit both sides. 3 days later, a shuttle from the USS Frontier docked with the Velcari flagship. Dr. Lisa Shun stepped aboard along with Dr. Amy Foster, the ship's cultural historian, and Commander Ben Rodriguez. They were escorted to a meeting chamber where Zarath waited with several other Velcari. I am Nelter, said one of the younger-looking aliens, his crystalline features showing more curiosity than the others. I study other species for the Empire. Your captain's words have created much discussion among us. Dr. Foster placed a small device on the table between them. This contains records of human history going back thousands of years. Art, literature, music, historical documents, everything that makes us who we are. Zarath gestured and the device was scanned by invisible beams. Information began flowing across crystalline displays that appeared in the air around them. Your species has survived multiple extinction events, Nelter observed, reading the data. Volcanic eruptions that blocked out your sun, ice ages that covered most of your world. Asteroid impacts that destroyed most life. Yes, Dr. Foster. Confirmed. And those were just the natural disasters. We also survived plagues that killed half our population, wars that lasted decades, and famines that starved millions. The Velcari exchanged glances that seemed heavy with meaning. Kethvel spoke first. On our world, such suffering is unknown. We evolved on a planet with stable weather, abundant resources, and no major predators. Our history is one of steady growth and peaceful expansion. That sounds wonderful, Dr. Chun said genuinely. But it also explains why you use fear as a weapon. You never learned to live with it. Explain this concept of living with fear, Neltor requested. Commander Rodriguez leaned forward. When I was a child, my family lived on a colony world called New Montana. We had earthquakes almost every month. Everyone was always afraid of the next big one, but we didn't leave. We built our houses to sway instead of break. We practiced evacuation drills. We helped our neighbors when their homes were damaged. Fear made us careful, but it also made us stronger. You stayed despite the danger, Morduan rumbled. It was our home, Rodriguez said simply. Fear told us to be prepared. It didn't tell us to give up. Dr. Foster activated a holographic display showing scenes from human history. This is footage from what we call World War II. Millions of soldiers went into battle knowing many of them would die. They were terrified, but they went anyway because they believed in something greater than their fear. The Velcari watched in fascination and horror as images played of humans charging into gunfire, pulling wounded comrades to safety, and defending positions against overwhelming odds. "This is madness," Kethful whispered. "This is courage, Doctor," Chun corrected. "The ability to do what needs to be done despite being afraid." Neltor's patterns shifted to colors none of the humans had seen before. "Show us more of this courage concept." Over the following hours, the humans shared story after story. They told of firefighters running into burning buildings to save strangers, of doctors staying with patients during deadly plagues, of parents working multiple jobs to feed their children, of scientists dedicating their lives to solving problems they might never see solved. "Your medical records show that you knew you might die from this plague, yet you continued treating patients," Zarath said to Dr. Chun, reading her personal files. "People were sick," Dr. Chun replied. "They needed help. Being afraid of getting sick myself didn't change that fact." "But the logical response would be to flee and preserve yourself," Morduan argued. "Maybe," Dr. Chun agreed. "But humans don't always choose the logical response. Sometimes we choose the right response instead." The cultural exchange continued. For days, the humans shared their music, and Neltor was particularly moved by songs about overcoming hardship. He listened to blues music, folk ballads about struggle, and symphonies composed during wars. "Your artists create beauty from suffering," he observed. "This is unknown to us. Our art celebrates only joy and perfection." Dr. Foster nodded. "Some of our greatest works come from our darkest times. Pain teaches us compassion. Loss teaches us to value what we have. Fear teaches us to be brave." Meanwhile, the Velcari shared their own culture. They showed the humans their perfect cities, their advanced technology, their peaceful society. But as the days passed, something became clear to both species. "Your people have never truly been tested," Rodriguez observed during one session. Zarath's expression darkened. "We have conquered hundreds of worlds through intimidation," Rodriguez said gently. "But have you ever faced a real threat to your existence? Have you ever had to choose between safety and what you believe in?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Finally, Neltor spoke. "No," he admitted. "We have always been the threat, never the threatened." Dr. Foster pulled up another historical record. "This is from something we call the Holocaust. Millions of people were killed simply for being different. But even in those death camps, some humans found ways to help each other. They shared food when they had none. They comforted the dying. They resisted when they could. They chose hope over despair," Dr. Chun added. "Even when hope seemed impossible." Zarath stood and walked to the chamber's viewing port, staring out at the stars. "We have ruled through fear for so long that we have forgotten what it means to face it ourselves. We have become the thing that others fear, but we have never learned to overcome our own fears. What do you fear?" Rodriguez asked quietly. The question seemed to surprise her. She turned back to the humans, her black eyes reflecting something. "That might have been vulnerability. Change," she said finally. "The unknown, losing control, being judged by others, being found wanting. Those are very human fears," Dr. Foster said softly. "Perhaps," Zarath replied. "But we have spent millennia avoiding them rather than facing them." Neltor moved closer to the humans. "Teach us," he said suddenly. "Teach us how to be brave." Neltor's request to learn bravery sparked something unexpected among the Velcari. Within days, a small research station was established in the space between the two fleets. It was built using both human and Velcari technology, creating a unique structure that seemed to blend organic curves with geometric precision. Lieutenant Sarah Park was among the first humans to volunteer for the extended cultural exchange. She had always been curious about other forms of life, and the chance to work closely with an alien species excited her more than it frightened her. Her counterpart was Neltor himself, who had become fascinated with human concepts of courage and sacrifice. "I do not understand your music," Neltor confessed during one of their sessions. They were in the station's recreation area, where Park had been playing recordings of various human songs. "The melodies are beautiful, but the words speak of pain and loss. Why do you create art from suffering?" Park thought for a moment before answering. "Maybe because suffering is part of life and art helps us make sense of it. When we sing about hard times, it reminds us that others have gone through the same things. It makes us feel less alone." She played a recording of an old blues song about a man who had lost everything but kept moving forward. Neltor listened intently, his crystalline features shifting through different colors as he processed the emotions in the music. "The singer has accepted his pain," Neltor observed. "But he does not surrender to it." "Exactly," Park said. "He's turning his pain into something that might help other people who are hurting." Neltor was quiet for a long time. "We Velcari have no such music? Our songs speak only of joy and achievement. We have never seen value in acknowledging suffering." Meanwhile, in another part of the station, an even more significant conversation was taking place. Velcari the Elder, one of the most respected philosophers in Velcari society, had requested a private meeting with Captain Morrison and Dr. Foster. Velcari was ancient even by Velcari standards. His crystalline skin had taken on a deep amber color, and when he moved, it was with the careful dignity of someone who had seen countless centuries pass. Unlike the other Velcari, he seemed less interested in human military capabilities and more fascinated by human philosophy. "I have studied the historical records you provided," Velcari said, his voice carrying the weight of ages. "There is something I do not comprehend. Your species has faced extinction multiple times, yet each time you rebuild, you explore, you reach for goals that seem impossible. Why do you not simply accept defeat?" Dr. Foster exchanged a glance with Morrison before answering. "Maybe because giving up isn't really living? If we just accepted defeat every time things got hard, we'd still be hiding in caves afraid of the dark." "But the logical response to overwhelming danger is retreat," Velcari countered. "Preservation of the species should be the primary goal." Morrison leaned forward. "Preservation isn't just about staying alive, Velcari. It's about preserving what makes life worth living. Freedom, dignity, the right to choose our own path. Sometimes those things are more important than safety." "You would die for abstract concepts?" Velcari asked. "People have," Morrison confirmed. "And because they did, the rest of us get to live free." Velcari was silent for a long time, processing this information. "Show me an example of this concept in practice." Dr. Foster activated a holographic display. "This is footage from a time we call the Civil Rights Movement. People who were treated badly because of their skin color decided to fight for equal treatment. They knew they might be hurt or killed, but they marched anyway." The hologram showed scenes of peaceful protesters being attacked by police dogs and water cannons. It showed people being arrested for sitting in the wrong section of a bus. It showed children walking through angry crowds just to attend school. "They were afraid," Dr. Foster continued, "but they decided their children's future was more important than their fear." Velcari watched the images with growing amazement. They faced violence without violence. They endured pain for others they had never met. They chose hope over fear. Morrison said, "They believed things could be better, even when everything around them said they were wrong." The conversation was interrupted by an urgent communication from the Velcari flagship. Zarath H appeared on the screen, and her usual composure seemed shaken. "Velcari, you must return immediately. We have received word from the Empire. A fleet of destroyers is coming to investigate our delay in securing this sector." Velcari S. Amber. Coloring seemed to deepen. "How long do we have?" 3 days at most. The destroyer fleet consists of 12 battleships under the command of war leader Thrakmer. They will not be interested in cultural exchanges. Morrison felt his stomach drop. "What does this mean for my people?" Zarath's expression was grim. Thrakmor believes in absolute dominance. His standard procedure is to destroy any species that shows resistance, then claim their worlds for the Empire. If he finds humans still free when he arrives, he will order the immediate extermination of all human colonies. The communication ended, leaving the three beings in heavy silence. Finally, Velan spoke. This is what you humans call a test, is it not? The moment when one must choose between safety and principle. Morrison nodded slowly. It looks that way. My people could ensure your survival, Velan said carefully. If you were to surrender now, accept Velcari rule, Thrakmor would have no reason to destroy you. You would lose your freedom but keep your lives. And if we refuse, Morrison asked, then you face almost certain death. Thrakmor's fleet carries weapons that could sterilize entire star systems. Your technology cannot stand against him. Dr. Foster looked at Morrison. Captain, we need to contact the frontier. The crew deserves to know what's coming. Morrison nodded and activated his communicator. Within minutes, he was connected to his ship's bridge. Commander Rodriguez appeared on the screen along with Dr. Chen and several other senior officers. Captain, we've been monitoring Velcari communications, Rodriguez reported. We know about the destroyer fleet. What's the mood among the crew? Morrison asked. Rodriguez smiled grimly. They're scared, sir. But they're also angry. No one likes being told they have to choose between freedom and survival, Dr. Chun stepped forward. Captain, we've been running scenarios. If we evacuate now, we might be able to get word to Earth and the colonies. Give them time to prepare or evacuate. Or we could stand and fight, Lieutenant Park's voice came from off-screen. Maybe we can't win, but we can show them that humans don't surrender easily. Morrison looked at the faces on the screen, then at Velan. What would you do, Velan? If you were in our position? The ancient philosopher was quiet for a long moment. Until 3 days ago, I would have counseled surrender. Preservation of life above all else was our way. But I have seen your music, your history, your willingness to suffer for others. I begin to understand that some things may indeed be worth dying for. But you still think we should surrender? Dr. Foster asked, Velan's amber coloring shifted to something deeper, more complex. I think, he said slowly, that I am beginning to understand what courage means. And I think the choice must be yours to make. The next 2 days passed like a countdown to the end of the world. The Joint Research Station became a hub of intense activity as both humans and Velcari prepared for what might be their final conversations. Nelter spent most of his time with Lieutenant Park, trying to understand every aspect of human courage before it was too late. I have made a decision, Nelter announced during one of their sessions. When Thrakmor arrives, I wish to stand with the humans. Park looked up from the human poetry she had been sharing with him. Nelter, that could mean your death too. Thrakmor won't care that you're Velcari if you're helping us. And then I will learn what it means to choose principle over safety, Nelter replied. Is this not what courage means? Word of Nelter's decision spread quickly through the Velcari fleet. Some called him insane. Others began to question their own certainties. The concept of choosing death over dishonor was so foreign to their species that it created chaos in their carefully ordered society. Captain Morrison spent his time in strategy sessions with Commander Rodriguez and the other senior officers. They knew they could not win a military confrontation with the destroyer fleet, but they refused to surrender without exploring every option. We could scatter, Rodriguez suggested. Take the frontier and run, try to warn Earth and the colonies. Thrakmor would hunt us down, Dr. Chun pointed out. And it would only delay the inevitable. Morrison stared at the tactical displays showing the approaching destroyer fleet. 12 massive warships, each one larger than anything humanity had ever built. Maybe delaying the inevitable is enough. Maybe giving our people time to prepare is worth the sacrifice. Captain, Lieutenant Park's voice came over the communication system. You need to see something. Nelter has an idea. In the research station's main conference room, Nelter stood before a mixed group of humans and Velcari. His crystalline features were bright with excitement and something that looked very much like determination. I have been studying human history, Nelter announced. Specifically, your methods of resistance against superior forces. There's a pattern I have noticed. Dr. Foster leaned forward with interest. What kind of pattern? You do not always fight with weapons, Nelter explained. Sometimes you fight with ideas. You make the cost of victory too high for your enemies to accept. You're talking about resistance movements, Morrison realized. Underground networks, making occupations so difficult that the occupiers eventually give up. Exactly, Nelter said, but I propose something different. Something that has never been tried in Velcari history. The room fell silent as Nelter activated a holographic display showing the positions of both fleets. Thrakmer expects to find either submission or military resistance, Nelter continued. He does not expect to find Velcari who refuse to follow his orders. Zarath, who had been listening from the back of the room, stepped forward. You speak of mutiny, Nelter. The penalty for defying a war leader is death. Yes, Nelter agreed simply. Just as the penalty for resisting Thrakmer is death for the humans. But if enough Velcari choose to stand with the humans, Thrakmer cannot kill us all without destroying a significant portion of our own fleet. You're talking about a civil war, Kethful said, his silver patterns flickering rapidly. I am talking about choice, Nelter replied. The choice that humans make every day. The choice to do what is right instead of what is safe. Velan the Elder moved to stand beside Nelter. The young one speaks wisdom. I too will stand with the humans. The announcement sent shockwaves through the assembled Velcari. Velan was not just any philosopher. He was one of the most respected beings in their society. His support gave legitimacy. To Nelter's proposal, this is madness, Morduan rumbled. Thrakmer will destroy us all. Perhaps, Velan agreed. But I've learned from human history that some madness is worth embracing. They call it hope. Over the next several hours, the Velcari fleet was divided as never before. Some ships declared their loyalty to Thrakmer and the Empire. Others announced their intention to protect the humans. Still others remained undecided, torn between centuries of conditioning and new ideas about courage and principle. When the destroyer fleet finally arrived, they found not a simple scene of conquest, but something unprecedented in Velcari history. Nearly half of Zarath's fleet had positioned themselves between the human ship and the approaching destroyers. Thrakmer's image appeared on screens throughout both fleets. He was larger than the other Velcari with darker coloring and features that seemed carved from black stone. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of absolute power. I am War Leader Thrakmer of the Imperial Destroyer Fleet, Commander Zarath. You will explain this delay in securing this sector. Zarath H. stood on her bridge, flanked by Nelter and Velan. War Leader, we have encountered a species that requires careful consideration. The humans possess qualities that could benefit the Empire. All species benefit the Empire through submission or elimination, Thrakmer replied coldly. Move your ships aside. I will demonstrate proper Imperial policy. I respectfully decline, Zarath said, her voice steady despite the magnitude of her defiance. The silence that followed was electric. Never in recorded Velcari history had a commander directly refused a war leader's order. You forget yourself, Zarath, Thrakmer said, his voice dangerously quiet. Stand down immediately or face the consequences. Instead of answering, Zarath opened a channel to all ships in both fleets. Today we face a choice that will define not just our own fates, but the future of our species. We can continue to rule through fear, or we can learn to grow through courage. The humans have shown us that there are things worth dying for. I choose to stand with them. One by one, other Velcari commanders voiced their agreement. Nelter, Velan, and eventually more than half of the original fleet declared their intention to protect the humans rather than conquer them. Thrakmer's expression grew darker with each declaration. So be it. If you choose to stand with aliens against your own species, you will share their fate. The destroyer fleet began to move into attack formation, but they found themselves facing not just one small human ship but dozens of Velcari. Vessels crewed by beings who had finally learned the difference between existing and living, Captain. Morrison opened a channel to Zarath. Commander, you don't have to do this. You could still withdraw, save your people. Zarath looked at him with something that might have been amusement. Captain Morrison, 3 days ago you asked me a question. You wanted to know why you weren't afraid. Now I have a question for you. What's that? Why aren't you afraid now, when facing certain death? Morrison smiled. Because we're not facing it alone. And because even if we lose, the idea will survive. The idea that thinking beings have the right to choose their own path? That's bigger than any one species or any one battle. Yes, Zarath said softly. I think I finally understand. Fear is not our enemy, it is our teacher. And what it has taught us is that some things are worth preserving, even at the cost of everything else. The battle that followed was brief but decisive. Not because of superior firepower, but because when the shooting started, more Velcari ships joined the rebellion than remained loyal to the Empire. Thrakmor found himself outnumbered by his own species. In the end, it was Valan who delivered the final message to the war leader. We have learned something from the humans, Thrakmor. We have learned that true strength comes not from inspiring fear, but from overcoming it. The empire built on terror ends today. The destroyer fleet retreated, but the real victory was not military. It was philosophical. The Velcari had discovered courage, and with it, the possibility of a different kind of future. Later, as the mixed fleet prepared for the long journey to Velcari space to spread the new ideas, Morrison found himself in a final conversation with Zarath. You asked me why I wasn't afraid, Morrison said. Now I want to ask you something. What will you do with this courage you found? Zarath looked out at the stars, where human and Velcari ships flew together in formation. We will explore, we will learn. We will face the unknown together. And when fear comes, as it always does, we will remember what you taught us. What was that? That being afraid is not the end of the story, it is only the beginning.